So what bothered you the most of the game? Just,
Other than
where did
losing?
you, what's that?
Other than losing the game?
Yeah, other than losing the game, of course.
I think I've told you guys before here, it seems to be pretty much every week for us. We've been in close games every week. And in this league, usually, when you're in games like that, it usually comes down to 5 or 6 plays. And I think that was the thing I was most upset with was, we had an opportunity to make those 5 or 6 plays and didn't. And it ended up ultimately costing us in the end and losing the game. So I think when you're in tight games, every single play matters, every snap matters. And when you give up, like I said, a handful of plays, ultimately it can lose a game for you. So that was probably the most disappointing.
Had long stretches of really good defense, winning defense this year, and then 4 games where you've given up 200 rushing yards and
Yeah.
lost all 4. Why hasn't it been more consistent when you've shown that you can do it for pretty long stretches?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even specifically when you look at the other night, I think, there was a major focus on Saquon Barkley, obviously, and I think now, granted, we missed a tackle ultimately on the play that he fumbled, but for the most part, in general, when you're talking about the run defense, I thought we did a pretty good job. Some of the unique runs, they popped a wildcat run on us. Obviously, the quarterback did a heck of a job pulling it and us not being able to make a play. So, again, back to when I said those 5 or 6 plays that ultimately did us in the other night, 3 or 4 of those were in the run game, and that's the thing when you're in games like that, you have to make that play. You got to find a way to make that play. And, specifically with the quarterback run game, let's say he does pull it and he gets 6 or 7 yards. Okay, you can live to fight another down, but you miss 2 or 3 tackles on it, then, that turns into a 24, 26, 28-yard run. And those are the things when I say those are, when you accumulate those 5 or 6 plays through a course of a game, that ends up being the difference.
What needs to be done to find that consistency? It's there, right?
Yeah, I wish because again, there's periods of games, there's periods of weeks where it does go well, and then we had a bad night, so it wasn't just one thing or one guy. It was one thing here, one thing there, and that's the quest, is just to find that week in, week out consistency, day in, day out. When you're in a game, play in, play out, to find that, because when we consistently play, as 11 guys as one, we've proven that we can play with anybody in this league. But when one guy's off here and then another guy's off there, that's where, it ends up costing you, obviously.
Hey, Joe, we've learned a few things about you in our 3 years with you, but one of them is you're not a throw your guys under the bus guy, so I get that. I just want to understand, on the 3rd play of the go-ahead field goal drive, Matt's talking about how we can't play that far off. So is that a call, or is that a young player not going where he's supposed to be?
Yeah, it was, first of all, it was an 8-yard gain. So I don't want to make, a mountain out of a molehill, but ultimately in that situation, and I love, I try to be as forthright with you guys all the time. In 2-minute drills, as we've talked about together in here, there's different types of 2-minute drills. And there's very rarely in a 2-minute is it truly no huddle running clock. Everyone always thinks the 2-minute drill is hectic and crazy and on the ball going fast. There's periods of 2 minutes that are. Now, that specific play was a running clock. And from a mindset standpoint, they needed a field goal. So you do have to be a little bit more aggressive with your calls in those situations compared to when a team needs a touchdown to beat you. Again, along those lines, from a defense perspective and a running clock, the hardest position to get the call is the corner that's on the furthest side of the field. It's easy if you're playing corner on our sideline. We can yell at them, we can signal. The hardest player to get the call in a running clock 2-minute is the corner on the far side of the field. CV did not get the call. So from a mindset standpoint, he's like, hey, I'm going to play off, I'm going to play safe, I'm going to keep everything in front of me. And he gave up an 8-yard out route. But so again, I think those are things that, we practice 2-minute every single week. But that's something that I have to help him from an educational standpoint, from a stressing standpoint. Hey, in a running clock 2-minute, if you're that guy on the far side of the field, you got to see the signal. It has to get communicated across the board to him. Now, I think he actually did probably the smartest thing where he didn't have the call. He's like, hey, I'm gonna play off. I'm gonna keep everything in front of me. If I give up a 7 or 8 yard, out cut in a 2-minute, it's not the end of the world. But those are all things, you went back to. I think that's, in the education and the growth of a young guy. I think that's something that he learned from.
So on the play where Robinson got the 32-yarder,
Yeah.
I understand, what happened in the slot. What is your thinking about playing man in that situation? I mean,
Well,
what are you
it's the same exact scenario when we beat New Orleans. It was the same thing when we beat the Chargers. It was, and again, you don't exclusively play one coverage principle in that situation. We happened to be in man on that and we got beat, which is unfortunate. I think a number of things could have been better. In a perfect world, I would have liked the pass rush to be a little bit better. In a perfect world, I think from an eye standpoint, from a leverage standpoint, we could have been better. But those are kind of the dice that you roll when you decide to play man in any situation. But we had played that same call in other games in the same 2-minute situations when a team needed 3 points to beat us, and we were successful with it. We were just unsuccessful on that play.
I don't want to make too much about it, but did McDuffie, so was he playing a spy in that situation, or would you have preferred him to be a fifth?
On that play?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he wasn't a spy. He was a low player. Yeah.
From the standpoint of everyone doing their 111th, we've heard that, and I think Matt
Yeah.
said that this week. I'm not in your meeting room, I don't know how it's coached, but is that just a hazard of this game that every once in a while you're not going to have everyone doing your 111th, or is there things that you need to change in how you're coaching it to make sure that doesn't happen?
I think. I mean, that's a great way to look at it. I think it's everybody. It's not just. We as coaches are part of that too, in teaching every single player what their 111th is. But that's the thing about football, and what makes it such a great sport is that it's 11 guys, and collectively 11 guys have to play as one. And if you have 10 guys or 9 guys doing their job, and you have one guy that's off, and offensively they run the perfect play and expose that, then you got issues. So, of course, that's the common goal on every single time the ball is snapped, is to get 11 guys playing as one, solid unit.
Joe, you've had some games this year where you guys have gotten after the quarterback pretty well.
Yeah. That was frustrating. It really was.
69 sacks in the first 12 games.
Sure.
For you guys not to get one, what do you think happened there?
I don't know. I wish I had, because we had been, there's games where I thought we didn't rush, great. But I mean, as of, the last handful of weeks, we had really been rushing well. And that group, a D-line is very similar to a offensive line. They have to be a cohesive group. And I've talked to you guys about it before with, when you talk about a 4-man pass rush, there's 6 rush lanes when you're rushing the passer. And if you're only rushing 4, well, you have to be coordinated and you have to be perfect and working with each other, because you have to eat up 4 rush lanes for or 6 rush lanes for a quarterback to escape in with only 4 rushers. So, and that's ball. And we really had been, like I said, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks, we'd done such a great job with that. And we fell short of that the other night. There's no doubt. It was that was frustrating, because we felt pretty good with our group, the way they had been rushing, that I never would have thought that would have been an issue.
How much did you emphasize the rush lane integrity going in?
Yeah.
Did you see this guy as that big a threat going in?
Yeah, I think, he had been, just alluded to the number of sacks that they had given up. He had been running for his life, the last handful of games. So, I think that's something, I use the word consistency all the time. We talk about, from a pass rush standpoint, it doesn't matter if you're playing against a quarterback that's a statue back there or you're playing against a guy that's an elite athlete. That's just something that's kind of commonly talked about every single week as far as coordinating your rush lanes. Because even an immobile quarterback, if you're not coordinated and proper with your rush lanes, he might not be at exposure for 25 yards, but he can step up in the pocket and run for, 5 or 6. So to answer your question, that's something that, I think Jerry and Rebs do a great job every week of stressing it and talking about it and coordinating the rush. And unfortunately, it didn't happen the other night.
To move on to this game, what's the challenge, or how do you combat a 6'5" Mike Evans?
Yeah, I think he's, I think last week or the week before, he just went over, 1,000 yards receiving for the 10th straight time. So, first ballot Hall of Fame receiver. We got to be around him firsthand a couple years ago when we coached the Pro Bowl, and he is all of 6'5". Special player. I think the most impressive thing to me with him is the number of different quarterbacks that he's been successful with, been productive, had 1,000 yards with. I think, is Baker his 4th quarterback that he's had 1,000-yard season with, I think. So just a do-it-all receiver, can do everything. Can run intermediate routes, can obviously take the top off and hit the home run. And also probably the trait that's most impressive with him is just the physicality that he plays with on every snap. So special player.
So how do you have your 5'11/6" corners? I realize everyone has to deal with the challenge, but
Yeah.
how do you combat that?
Well, I think you got to do a number of different things, which we do, playing different coverage principles, doing different things to frustrate him. Obviously, doing a great job with the pressure on the quarterback. Best way to stop a receiver is eliminate the quarterback. So, but it will be a great challenge. He's a great player.
Joe, Wyatt seems to get a lot of pressures, gets towards the quarterback. How does he finish? Like, what's the key? Is there anything, because he's young, that he's not quite doing right, or what do you do to get that?
Yeah, just we got to keep stressing it, because you're exactly right. He's been in position. I don't know how many legitimate sacks that he's missed, but he's, to me, and pass rushers will tell you, usually the hardest thing is to win the one-on-one, to beat the 300-pound guy that's blocking you. Finishing on the quarterback's usually the easy part, and he's had a number of ops where he's had great rushes. So from a positive standpoint, we obviously want him to keep doing that. He's just got to find a way to finish and get the guy down. There's no doubt.